Context Media partners with physician practices around the country to provide timely and relevant education on chronic care management.
I'll keep it really simple too. It raises a marketplace for gift cards, simply an exchange that connects buyers and sellers for gift cards.
Shawn, Riegsecker, Centro. We are enterprise digital media planning and buying software for the media industry.
Justyn, one of the founders and CEO of Sprout. We're a social media management software company.
Okay, so everybody here except for Justyn is sort of from here, but you came back. So can you talk about how you ended up in Chicago and how Chicago's worked out for you?
Yeah, so I'm originally from California. I had been in Chicago for probably 7 years when we started the company, and there was a little bit of pressure early on to be in the Valley for the kind of business that we're running, particularly partnering with Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and those companies in the Valley. Didn't have a particular reason other than just being kind of stubborn and wanting to build our business here, so we stuck around here in Chicago. It's turned out to be a tremendous advantage, and we're really glad we did it. We didn't know what kind of advantage it would be at the time, but it worked out really well for us.
Okay, so you're going to not tell us the advantage, right?
So, I mean, I think if you come to a lot of these events, we all talk about the advantages. Recruiting and retaining talent in this city is an outstanding advantage. Operational costs are obviously an advantage. I really think that there's something about the lack of distraction, the focus on the job to be done, and just building cool shit that makes Chicago a pretty cool place to build a business.
You want to talk about talent and keeping talent, sort of the loyalty issue?
Yeah, I mean, definitely to echo kind of what Justyn's saying. I think retention and talent has been, key to our success. We have amazing people that are committed and are there for the long term, really believe in the vision, are bought into the business, which is huge here. Incredibly dedicated, incredibly heads down and focused on building something bigger. And I think kind of that chip on our shoulder that we have kind of from the Midwest, grassroots, want to build something bigger is something that's really worked to our advantage.
Shawn, anything to add to that?
And just in regards to why Chicago?
No, really the sort of the loyal talent thing, sort of the retention of talent thing. Because you guys have been at it for quite a while.
So Chicago is a city. It's really interesting, and everyone wants to try to compare, and everybody tries to get into this. Who's better, who's not, and on some level I think it's a silly conversation, because from an entrepreneurial standpoint, no matter where you build something, you're going to have your challenges. Chicago's amazing for so many reasons. One, the location. Two, the quality of living. Three, it's probably the best city in the world as far as I'm concerned. But also, when I think about it this way, in my sector, and we've got about 620 people today, there's other like companies that I compete with in New York, they're in the Valley, they're all burning significant amounts of capital. And I'm not talking like 10 million or 20 million, I'm talking they're burning through 30, 40, $50 million a year to try to compete, okay? The only year we've ever lost money was 2008. Now, here's the way it works. If I were in either city, my real estate costs and my labor costs would go up at least 30%. Those two factors alone would turn Centro unprofitable overnight. So there's a huge advantage just to the cost structure. I'm in total belief also the people are great. I talked to a competitor, I was at a festival over the last week in Europe, and he's in San Francisco, he's like, I've been thinking about putting a development office in Chicago. And I said, why is that? He goes, I can't keep developers. He said, they're getting literally poached from me every other week. He goes, they're there for 8 months on average tenure. And look, it's not especially easy to hire engineers, developers, creative product folks anywhere, but at least it's not as bad for us, I think it is over there. Final thing for me, which I think is critically important about our city, is that, and there's a great saying I've heard VCs say, that entrepreneurs may not have the big exits that they have in the Valley, but the founders make a lot more money. And the reason is we're not burning through so much capital, we're not diluting ourselves, we're not taking on significant amounts of money and people jamming VC funds down our throat just because they want to try to get into the next big thing. And we tend to build a lot better, more sustainable businesses over the long term.
I think just real quick, it also has to do with the employees, on that side, earning a lot more money because there's not so much preference or so much capital that's been raised ahead of a liquidity event that needs to be paid back to the investors that were in early on. And so I think it's a fantastic exit for everyone throughout the organization, not only just the founders.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, employees, founders, anybody who's invested in, not just the investors.
So I'm glad you tied it to sort of the profitability is important, but the equity, especially for an audience of entrepreneurs, is really important. The other thing you mentioned, and you can talk about B2B, just sort of the culture of Chicago and how so much of what we're focused on is really B2B, and how that sort of sets the stage for these kinds of fold-in and acquisitions and working with a lot of the big companies that are part of what's going on in Chicago.
Definitely. Many of the businesses being built in Chicago are solving real problems. And that A, attracts talent that wants to come and solve it with you. B, keeps them working tirelessly until you've solved it globally. And C, it means that there isn't a shiny object syndrome. Oh, there's a new app that makes funny sounds. Let's go build it with them. Oh, now we can do this instead. Let's go do it. And we're talking about the number of years that most of us have been at it in building our businesses. And right from the top all the way to our teams, there's very high retention because we find meaning in what we do. And we're solving something not just for a group of people, not just for a niche audience, not just for a quick trend that will get taken over by a new trend soon after. It's really sustainable businesses over time. And Chicago ecosystem is really great. Oftentimes people say, well, fail early and fail fast, and that's true in a certain way. But you also want to be committed to what you're building. People ask, well, what's your TAM? What's your total addressable market? Well, you go create one. If your solution's a good one, you actually go find that. And Chicago is such a great proxy for any other market. If you look at the diversity here, it's the city of paradoxes. We have people who are very fashion forward, but also fashion conservative. We have people with ethnic diversity, age and experience diversity, but also people that are looking for solutions that work for them. And if you can prove your business in Chicago, you can then translate that into almost any other city in the world.
So apropos of that, I was struck by one of the Grubhub guys who said the biggest mistake he made in the expansion of Grubhub was to go to San Francisco, which is really like another planet. And when you have a whole city of early adopters, it really gives you a distorted view of sort of the interest and the appetite for your business. The other thing that he said was interesting. He said it was, if you go to New York, it's like 5 different cities. So you have to deal with that as well. But I'm interested in the fact that you, in particular, this is really your first job. Everybody else on the panel is sort of a serial person or came from the work world and applied their experience. But let's just talk about that. How do you feel, and how have you brought experienced people in to sort of support you in areas as you built the company, and to focus on areas that you didn't necessarily bring to the party?
In many ways, that naivete fortunately ended up working out in my favor. It could have totally backfired as well. But what was key is really building a team of people around us, whether it was physicians, whether it was developers, of all different functions that actually enabled the growth, but really a bias towards action. It's easy to sit and make a plan. It's easy to talk about it all day. It's easy to do focus groups and market studies, and you can do that for the next 10 years and still not launch. The only way to learn is actually get out in the market, talk to your customer, understand their pain points, and build for them. All of the other stakeholders follow. At the end of the day, the only voice that truly matters is your end user, it's your customer. And listening to them, interacting with them directly, getting out and doing a Q&A session, observing them in their natural environment and how they're using your product is the only way to truly learn, no matter what experience you come from. But building a very strong team around you that's all willing to go through that journey with you is extremely important.
George, how did you make use of your prior work experience in the new business?
So I was working in a grocery store, for many that don't know, but I was working for my family business, and I guess a lot of it has to do with building a real business and a real foundation. My father still reminds me every day, profitability, break even, because when you come from a family business, whatever's left over is what you take home, and how you grow your business and how you feed your family. And so I think many of those lessons that were learned in the grocery store really applied to, kind of what we're building today. And I think many of us on this panel can relate to that, of wanting to build a real business, something that will last. Like we all talk about building a 100-year-old business if we can, if that's what it takes. And everyone's committed to the long term. As Shradha says about the whole shiny object thing, I know too many founders all over the place that they think of another idea or something else and they just leave their companies behind and jump over to start something else and try to fill the role and put someone else in charge. And, everything's always about, building the resume or doing something else. I think it's more important to build a legacy and be known for something. And that goes from top to bottom, making all of your employees and everyone around you feel like they're building something bigger and that they're part of something that can change the world. And I think that's how you get the buy-in, that's how you get the conviction of everyone around you, and how you build a real sustainable, a profitable, and a business that's really going to last.
Justyn, how about you?
So to the original question, I think Sprout is in kind of a unique position in that probably 80% of our leadership team today is our first-time leaders. There's a lot of ways to build a company. There's hiring great, talented, seasoned people is certainly a way to do it. It's worked out really well for us to bring in or to form a team that is heavily new to this. We've learned on the job. We've learned together. I think in a lot of ways that's helped solidify and concrete our culture. One of the issues that I think not a lot of people talk about that is a problem with Chicago is when you start looking for very specialized talent, it becomes hard to find. If you're looking for something very specific to the software industry or a particular technology. So certainly there are cases where we're bringing in seasoned folks, but we've got kind of just this pattern of giving people responsibility that's kind of above their weight class and helping them grow into that. I think that's kind of Midwestern in some ways. And it's worked really well for us. I don't know if that's repeatable or not, but that's kind of our situation.
I don't want to jump in real quick, but kind of exactly off what Justyn was saying, it goes back to also the hiring process and how you build a business and how you build a company. I know at Raise, we don't just hire when we look at a resume. It really has to do with the individual and character. We believe that character is something that's consistent. It's what people really value and what they believe in. And those are the type of people that we want to bring in, the type of people that are hard work and are scrapping, are willing to do whatever it takes to succeed and to do what is ever best, not just for themselves, but for everyone. And so character, I think, is a huge fact that we have to our advantage, especially in the Midwest, and something that we definitely talk about all the time.
So, Shawn, talk a little bit about this issue that we don't really toot our own horns here very much, and the sort of another Midwestern virtue.
Yeah, so the neg on Chicago, and I think there's truth to that Chicago's a flyover city, the light's not shone upon us, the press doesn't cover Chicago, and I actually think there's, some level of truth inside of all of that. I know, some people say, well, there's a lot of great B2B companies, but, can Chicago actually launch some really great B2C plays? And I would say if you look at Grubhub, if you look at Groupon, if you look at Raise, these are all B2C plays behind working it out. So, I don't think it's one way or the other. I don't think we should play victim to, God, if I'm going to build a B2C company, I got to move out to the Valley because that's where all the people are. Okay? So from that perspective, when it comes to actually building a company and getting the press and accolades about it, it's a double-edged sword. Okay? And I talk about this all the time, especially with our staff, that people are always going to say, well, by the way, here's what, Centro, you're the largest company nobody's ever heard of in the industry. I hear that all of the time. And you know what's great about that? By the time people figure out what we're doing, it's too late for them to catch up. Okay? In the Valley, you build a company, there are 4 other VC firms that have just a lookalike company built within 6 months doing almost the exact same thing. I actually like, on some level, the not having all of the press focused on us. I think it's actually helped, and that sounds crazy, but I think it's allowed us to build a very sustainable business. And we've been quietly working on a new platform for 2 years and haven't launched it. This is a massive automation platform for the industry, and we just started showing people a month ago, and it's a holy shit nobody's even heard of this. Nobody even knew you guys were working on this. And I think it's one of the best things that's going to help us because we're 2 years ahead. Nobody's going to be able to compete with us on this one.
So George said he wouldn't fall for that trap, and he's going to keep all the stuff that Raise is doing a complete secret, right, George?
Yeah, I mean,
He's doing actually a lot of stuff and a lot of secrets, trust me. And when you guys actually figure out what he's really working on, watch out.
Yeah, and again, thanks, Shawn. I'm just trying to be like this guy when I grow up. That's it. But
You got a lot of years to catch up, brother.
Again, it's about building something bigger than what anybody can see or what anybody can relate to. We believe in press when it builds brand value and it builds kind of around the whole thought of like what we're doing is something special, with the retailers, with the consumers and whatnot, and making sure that our message is heard. We don't believe in press for praise. I'm not out there trying to go out and be on magazine covers or anything, and that's not really important. And you see that too many times as being like the end goal. And so many of us are building so many special things behind the scenes that we don't have to go out and go on top of the hill and beat on our chest and talk about what's happening or what we're doing. I think there's something really special about flying under the radar and building something, secretly that you just can't wait until it kind of comes out and people really find out about you, and it's part of the buy-in and all that stuff.
Just one quick thing on it. It's so funny. I can go through the over 10 years that I've had the company, and I do this with my staff because I guarantee you, if you're an entrepreneur, you've got a great company, every year there's going to be 2 or 3 press releases where your staff is going to freak out and they're going to go, "Oh my God, this company, did you see what they just announced? Oh my God, we're going to go out of business. They're going to kick our butts." Happens all the time. 95% of those press releases are not worth the paper that they were actually printed on. And I've never understood strategically, why would you announce something 90 days or 6 months or even a year in advance of what you're going to do? That is maybe one of the dumbest strategic moves you could make as a CEO.
Why would you print a press release on paper?
No
what it
comments.
There's another important aspect to the kind of the feedback loop, particularly in the Valley, that I think is a disadvantage. So we see this happen here to some degree as well, but when you're in the Valley and you're working on something, a lot of the ideas and a lot of our businesses maybe didn't make a lot of sense to people early on, or wouldn't have had kind of the positive feedback. And when you're getting that constant coverage and that constant feedback loop, that's a great way to get talked out of a good idea, right? The same thing happens with investors and advisors. If you listen too much to that feedback cycle, which I think the fact that there's less of that here is works to our advantage. But if you're constantly listening to that, you're going to be it's going to seep into how you think strategically, and that, like I said, could steer you in exactly the wrong direction.
So let me ask this. Well, go ahead. You were going to make a comment.
Yeah, there's something very fundamentally Midwest in all our values, and we talk at Context Media often, and it's this idea of humble invincibility. It's easy for people to look at the Midwest and Chicago and say, oh, the people are too humble. What people forget, similar to the debate on whether you should fundraise or not that you guys just heard, and what does raising money mean, is means to an end. A lot of people say, well, you just raised money, congratulations, you've succeeded. Well, no, the work just began. We can all attest to that, right? And similarly, even when the conversation is around press awareness, that's only means to an end. None of us, most entrepreneurs, are not inspired to build a business because of personal ego. It's actually a lot easier to get more Instagram followers through quirky photos than it is to get featured in the right place for the right reasons. What inspires us to build businesses is because every single day we have an insatiable desire to change something, to improve something, to evolve something. And if we are focused on doing that, there's only so many hours in a day to then go about beating our chest about it. Now, of course, building a brand is very important when it's the means to an end. If you're looking to attract talent to your business, if you're looking to attract investors, if you have a B2C business that, of course, you want your consumers to know, but just going out there and shouting from the rooftops doesn't really achieve much except for maybe a hoarse throat.
Just one quick comment on that, which is the, George, shut up for a second, let me finish this idea. It's been always very funny to me that somehow companies don't get respect unless they get VC money or they get private equity money or there's some announcement of a Series A or a Series B or I'm on my Series D, okay? And all of a sudden everyone thinks that you got something cool going on, okay? We had 150, we had about 200 employees before we did a Series A round of investment. Okay, we were already at a relatively decent scale. Every time I see a press release, I always look at it in the inverse too, which every time I see a company on their C, D, E, these unicorn rounds, all I can think of is how diluted all the employees and the founders just got that day. I mean, it really is, there's a huge downside to not building a profitable, sustainable business.
So let me ask you this question. I'm going to ask it for the three people except for Shawn, because I'm sick of listening to Shawn. So this is about growth. And what happens in entrepreneurial businesses, and I think all three of you guys are sort of poised at this cusp, is in the early days, the entrepreneur has his foot on the gas or her foot on the gas, and everybody is saying, be a little conservative, be a little calm. And then you get to a point where all the investors are saying, let's go for it, let's go big or go home. And you're a little more conservative because you're trying to build a real, profitable, sustainable business. So I feel like each of you guys are probably right in the midst of those kinds of conversations. So share a little bit about your thinking. Whoever wants to start is fine.
Sure, I can start. So there's kind of this inverse relationship that happens early on. You get kind of stoked and you want to spend and hire big and do those things. And early stage investors, a lot of times are looking for something, proven, market fit, and those sorts of things. But then, like you said, when you've proven that and it becomes time to scale, you start to get misaligned with your investors at some point, in most cases, not all cases. And that misalignment comes in, there's kind of a binary outcome for the investors involved, especially the later stage folks. They're looking for something very big. Anything short of that, they don't care as much about. They have a lot of hands being played. Whereas this
is your only business.
This is it. This is I've put five years into this business. The people at the table with me have done the same. We've got sacrifice and all of this stuff. I can't risk, and it's a balance, right? Because you can't be a successful entrepreneur if you're not willing to take a lot of risk, but you have to temper it versus what your investors might advise. In that once a quarter, 1 hour conversation of, fuck it, let's spend more money. You got to be careful.
George?
I think it's understanding first who you're getting in bed with and who your partners are. Making sure that there's complete alignment between the potential investor first, that all the firms that are going to pitch you guys all have a ton of money. They all know the same people, and they're all going to promise you the world. It's understanding the guys that really genuinely care about the business and are going to help take the business to the next level. And so we kind of ran a reverse process. We went out and met, a handful of firms, kind of interviewed all the partners there. And first I wanted to build a relationship between the partner and myself, and then understand that the firm has similar values to the values of my business. And so going into that, I knew that these investors and my partners that were now part of this business were completely aligned with where I was coming from. They bought into the vision. They understood that, all the time things are not like green grass and sunshine. And what really happens when things go bad or when there are issues? How are people going to react? How are they going to help you kind of muddle your way out of a mess and really add value? And I can't tell you how many times that our investors challenge us and they'll push us and whatnot. But at the end of the day, things are going well. They're not going to want to throw a wrench in the business. And that goes back to like what Shawn was saying. It has to do with how much of the business the founder still maintains, the amount of the business that the employees, have retained, where you can make those decisions. You're not listening to the guy that spends a couple hours a quarter with you. It's the person that's in the driver's seat that's making all those decisions. And that's what's been incredibly important to us. We've hand-selected all the guys going into it, picked the right partners. There's complete alignment with all of us, and they have real faith in us that we're going to continue to execute.
And most of us are marketplace businesses, and it's very important for us to execute very focused while listening to the market. We can't get so ahead of ourselves on one side that the other side can't catch up, and it becomes a seesaw that's just broken on one direction. The analogy that I use too is the early years you're laying the bricks. You're building this house or this building, and you're laying the bricks, and you want to see how quickly can you lay the bricks. Are you laying them in the right shape and right size? And then at some point it becomes important to also pour concrete, because you don't want to build a house of cards. You don't want it to collapse at some scale, and investing that time to make sure that you do build good processes around. You do clarify what each employee or each team in your company actually owns. Early years are really fun, right? Because everybody wears lots of hats, everyone jumps in, no matter what needs to get done, and that's the kind of people you also look for because they're just hungry, they're tenacious, they're gonna find a way. They're gonna not stop until they have fixed the problem. And then as you grow, you want to give people very focused goals. You want to know, are they just busy? Is there a lot of activity in your company or actually making progress? And it's sometimes harder to define what progress means, but actually setting those goals, setting KPIs, defining what a win actually means for your team, what are the goals for the business, whether it's the quarterly goals or whether it's the annual goals, you do have to make that transition from running a startup to running a high growth stage company and invest all your resources into pouring the concrete so you can keep growing as fast as you possibly can in alignment with the markets.
You want to add something,
I was
Shawn?
going to say, I think
George?
There's no
the
question.
startup
I've
word
been
is
sitting
abused.
on the microphone over here.
No, I think the startup word just really short is abused all the time. Like, startup does not mean I can blow money and make mistakes and who gives a shit and whatever happens, happens. And, you know, a startup just means it's in the infancy phases of a new business that you're trying to prove. And, you know, you hear it too many times used loosely, like, oh, we're a startup, whatever, we're a startup, we can do that. There's no such thing. It's a business at the end of the day. And you have people that have trusted you and given you money to grow that business and continue to be partners.
Well, Howard, thank you for giving me the stage. So, actually,
We're going to remove your seat here if you...
I'm trying to change the conversation, not up here on the stage, but in the community, especially in Chicago. Look, I get it. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, people in a garage working your butt off. You've got enough money to pay for some food and some rent before you run out of cash. And you've got to get, as we refer to, an MVP built, get it into the market, try to get customer adoption. I just want to change the term because I think a minimally viable product, and there's a ton of lean startup, agile, if you want to refer to them as zealot, I think they miss about the idea that there's a building a business versus a facade of a product that actually can't grow, scale, and be architected well on the back end. So I refer to it, and the way I've been really talking about it is, we need to work on building MDPs, which are minimally desirable products. What is the minimally desirable product that you can put in the market that someone actually wants, not what is just viable to get someone out? So it's kind of a flag I keep putting out.
I also think that basically the whole, lean movement sucks. But the reason is I think it's a way of making your first users into your beta testers. And we talk about minimum viable audience because the truth is you can build anything, but it's going out and doing sort of the hard work of asking real customers, what are the pain points? It's what you said before, Shradha. And also, are they willing to pay for this stuff? Because there's an infinite demand for stuff that they'll say, oh, go back and make it blue and we'll buy it all day long and all this kind of stuff. So I don't think that happens. But I think, the other real question is, and again, you guys have sort of alluded to it, I think, Justyn, you haven't done as much. I'm just curious as to whether the two of you have brought in sort of mature or sort of grown-ups at some point, and then how do you juggle the young sort of fire eaters who grew up, doing anything it took with, when you bring, you move to a growth stage, you really have to have some people that say no, not let's all go charge in every single direction at the same time. So what's been the experience about bringing in some talent that's sort of not just, sort of your contemporaries, but more experienced folks? Anybody?
I don't know. I'll jump in.
Well, I think Justyn said he didn't do it, so that's why I was excluding you, right?
It's diversifying the talent that you have and the team. There's different stages of the business. Sometimes it's just at a point where it doesn't work out for certain people because they have certain commitments. There's bills to pay. There's a family to feed. That doesn't make sense. But over the maturity of the business, we've always taken talent, scrappiness, and a hard work ethic over a resume or age or any of that stuff. And we believe in diversifying that group. I mean, there's executives that are young. There are executives that are older. There's a mix all in between. Same thing goes with our employees. I think there are many things that you can learn from the different generations. There are ways, that I look at all of our employees. I look at everyone else around. I look at, all these guys up here as my mentors and my teachers. And I learn a little bit every day from each and every person. And what are they doing really well? What can we do even better? what didn't go so well? How can we avoid doing that? And it's not so much a one size fits all. Like what works at Raise may not work at Context. It may not work at Centro, but try different things. You know, there's no such thing as making, you know, too many little mistakes. Just don't make big ones and ones that can jeopardize your business. And again, you're just learning. No one has, you know, it down. No one has the equation, and don't be afraid to kind of go out there and take risk.
And building business is a game of execution, not of strategy. And it's too often confused where people feel that, well, if you bring a lot of experienced people, they can create beautiful decks of what you should be doing in the next 5 to 10 years. I could not sit here and predict for you what the world will look in 5 years. 5 years ago, there were no tablets in the marketplace. And half our revenue now comes from a product that didn't exist 5 years ago. So I'm glad I didn't make a business plan 5 years ago, right? That I was listening to the market and remained agile. So you definitely want the diversity in your team, diversity of experiences and perspectives. But one thing that we also look for, very similar, echoing what George is saying, is people who want to make something happen. They want to act. They want to learn. They're not trying to figure it all out. They don't walk in the door thinking they know it all. Doesn't matter where they come from. They haven't done exactly this before. They haven't lived this day, Friday, June 26th, 2015, ever before. And tomorrow is Howard Tullman's birthday.
Hey.
Shawn?
We'll sing happy birthday at the end for you, Howard. I'll lead it. So I just want to talk.
This is the last comment, and then I want to take a few questions. So go
All
ahead.
right, so just quickly one thing on teams and exec teams. So the hard truth about being a founder, about building a business that gets large over time, and it's one of the hardest things, probably the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, is that the team that you can attract, okay, is not the same team. You know, the person that you can attract when you're 25 people or 50 people may not be the same person that's going to also be, this person will get you to 300, 400, 500 people. And you are, as a CEO or founder, at times you have to make gut-wrenching decisions on on people who you love, who are your friends, who have helped you get your business to where you needed it to go, but at some point it wasn't the right person, and you got to make that decision. And that's, because, and by the way, I always say, if I don't make those hard decisions, the board will make that decision on me. It's very simple. So just keep that in mind as you think about going through the next few years.
I feel like I read that somewhere recently. George, anything?
Just before taking questions, I think it's just be proud of what you're building, regardless of, what anybody else thinks. You don't need everyone else's buy-in if what you're doing is truly something special. I mean, I look back, 4 years ago, we were in an apartment. 3 years ago, we had our first Techweek, and we were this irrelevant company that nobody knew about or had heard about. But that didn't matter. We believed in what we were doing, and we knew where we wanted to be one day. And so, there's plenty of you guys out there that are starting businesses or have new businesses or trying to get to scale. And one day I hope that I can look back and, see you guys up here on the stage and listen to you guys talk about all the lessons that you guys have had, because I think that's where success lies. It's being able to take what we've learned and the challenges that we've faced and help you guys out in any way that we can, so that we're looking at all the future leaders of this great city one day.